Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about the top 7 signs that you were raised by a narcissistic mother. And this is different than the signs of a narcissistic mother. So now we're talking about you as an adult and how you operate in the world as a result of the narcissistic abuse. So we're talking about outcomes, behaviors, perhaps self-sabotage that you notice in yourself that you may not realize is connected to the narcissistic abuse. So today we're going to talk about that, the top signs in you that say that you were raised by a narcissistic mother. And of course, this isn't an exhaustive list. There will be more that you can probably think of, but these are the 7 that I see and hear about most commonly and that I have dealt with myself. So, the first one on my list is that you operate from a false self. And this happens because very early in childhood, often you realize that being yourself, your true self, was not acceptable to your mother and possibly other people in the family. So, this could be when you were very, very young, something happened, usually at the hands of your mother, that made you realize that it was no longer safe to be yourself. And an example is that when I was about 2.5, I'm guessing, I think I was about 2.5. I have the memory, but I'm not certain of the exact age. But as a toddler, I was trying to get my mother's attention while she talked on the phone. And instead of engaging with me or letting me know I should be quiet or whatever a healthy mother would do. Instead, out of nowhere, she smacked me across the face really hard. And so that became the moment, I believe, when I started operating from my false self. So instead of being that vivacious child who was trying to get attention, looking for attention and not stopping until she got it, suddenly I realized that attention is dangerous and instead, you want to hide and you want to be as quiet as you possibly can, disappear entirely if that's possible. And that was the false self that kind of took over. So I became someone who was very behind the scenes. And I really believe that about myself, that I was very shy, very behind the scenes. I wanted to fade into the background. But funny enough, I never could because that is not the real me. In fact, the real me is someone who is comfortable being seen, does want a healthy amount of attention, and does not want to fade into the background. And if you are a behind the scenes kind of person, there is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with preferring to not be in the spotlight, but you want to make sure that is who you really are and not just this manifestation of a false self that you've developed so that you can avoid your mother's wrath. So that's the first one with a real life example from me. And number 2 would be hypervigilance. And this is what we call it when you are constantly on guard for potential threats in your environment. And it manifests as literal tension in your body. So, a lot of survivors of narcissistic abuse have TMJ, which is the jaw tension, chronic pain, stiffness, all of that stuff. And that is from literally feeling very tense in your body because you're constantly on guard for threats. You can never relax. And of course, this happens because you never knew when the bomb was going to go off with your mother. You never knew when you were going to say or do the wrong thing and get in trouble. And on top of that, you grew up with the knowledge, not just the belief, but the knowledge that nobody had your back in this family, at least not your mother, who was your primary caregiver. And in a narcissistic family system, it looks like probably nobody had your back. And so what you had to do was develop this sense of taking care of yourself without anyone else to lean on at an age that was way too young to be able to do that. So you're really trying to step into the adult role of taking care of yourself and not allowing for that healthy child to develop. You lose all the sense of wonder and joy of being a child. You don't get to be curious or playful, which is what childhood is supposed to be about. And that adds to the false sense of self because you're not developing or discovering who you are. And another example is I can remember I was a ballet dancer when I was younger, and every time I went to ballet class, without fail, the teacher would come over to me and only me, and she would put her hands on the top of my shoulders and she would push them down because they were always up here because of this hypervigilance that I was living with. So that is sign number two. Sign number three is emotional dysregulation. And this is a common symptom of anyone who's grown up with complex PTSD or childhood trauma. And this is because you've been forced to suppress your emotions. You got the message very early that your honest emotions weren't allowed. Expressing your emotional needs might have got you punished or at the very least ignored and unsupported. You knew that you were there to support your mother's emotions, to walk on eggshells so she doesn't blow up, to be as good as you can so that she's okay. It was always about her emotions and never about yours. So you may have suppressed them, you may have shut them down, and now they're very scary to you. And on top of that, the dysregulation happens when you don't know what to do with them. So we're human, even if we try to suppress our emotions, they are going to come out somehow. And a lot of times that looks like uh, blowing up, like lashing out at someone. And we feel emotional triggers, which are an overreaction to something relatively small because it is not actually about that thing that was done or said. The overreaction is all this emotion that has been suppressed and is actually related to the anger that you weren't allowed to feel or show toward the person who deserved it, which was your mother. So instead, today it might be your husband who gets it because he says something you don't like, which it doesn't mean he was right, but the level of your outrage is so much more than what he has done. That's just an example, and this suppressed rage, by the way, can really harm us in terms of chronic pain, autoimmune disease, chronic illness, all these things that make us really sick. So it's important to learn to regulate your emotions, especially anger, but all the emotions, the range of emotions, so that you can be healthy, you can really have that quality of life that you deserve. And it's to understand yourself as well. We all deserve to have a life where we can express ourselves emotionally. It's really important to be able to do that. And then the number four sign that you were raised by a narcissistic mother is that you are over responsible. And being over responsible is something that starts when you're a child. And it may be because you're an older sibling and you had to take care of younger siblings. But regardless of that, you will feel this sense that you have to do for other people in order to be worthy. And you got that message, of course, in your home where you weren't acceptable just for who you were. In fact, you weren't even allowed to be who you were, which goes back to sign number one, the false self. But you knew that your value came in how other people view you, and that started with your mother. So, this maternal influence of showing you that you weren't acceptable just how you were, that you had to be something different in order to win her acceptance, that kind of goes out to everyone else. Like, you don't make the logical conclusion that it's just my mother I have to be like that with. You adjust so that you're operating in the world this way, in your friendships, in your relationships. You just feel like you are responsible for other people's emotions. You are responsible for making other people happy. Have you ever said like, Are you mad at me? Just because somebody's in a bad mood, you assume it's because you've done something, even though you don't know what you've done. That's such an echo of growing up in the narcissistic home where you really had no control. You could just be in the doghouse and not even know what you've done. And so you feel like, okay, if I do enough, if I give enough, I'll be acceptable. And the over responsibility comes from, again, that having to take care of other people's emotions, especially your mother's, perhaps like I did, having to take care of other children. So when my sister came along when I was 2.5, I had to take care of her. So, and not just in the typical ways that a sibling takes care of a younger sibling, which can be kind of cute and, loving and helpful and really sweet and all that. It wasn't like that. It was like in the morning, nobody was coming to get her, just like nobody came to get me. But now instead of just taking care of myself in the morning, now I had to take care of a baby as well. So I would have to literally get into her crib and take care of her until someone decided to show up and do their job. That was basically it. And then this carried on with me having to get her ready for school and taking her to school and walking her home. And the school thing may not sound like such a big deal, but it did prevent me from being able to develop friendships. Like I couldn't stay after school and play with my friends or anything like that. And in fact, I can remember the one time I did do that. When I got home, I got in big trouble because I stayed half an hour after school to play with my friends. And I can remember that being one of the few times I felt free. I was that 30 minutes that I was playing with my friends is one of the few times I remember I felt this sense of childish abandon. And then as soon as I got home, I was punished for that. So that is number four, over responsible. Number five is that we have toxic relationships. So it's not only that the relationship with our mother is toxic because of her, that primes us to get into toxic relationships with other people. And I don't only mean lovers and husbands, I mean workmates, I mean friendships. I mean, it might seem like you are just a magnet for narcissistic and toxic people everywhere you go. And that's because you really have been primed to put up with things that narcissists want you to put up with. You don't have good boundaries because it wasn't safe to set boundaries as a child. Actually, it was safer not to set boundaries. So you've grown up with this false belief that in order to be okay, safe, accepted, loved, to please other people, I can't have any boundaries. Well, that is the green flag for the narcissist because what narcissists do is they test you at the beginning of the relationship. And this could be any relationship. And you want to remember this, especially with love bombing. This is how they get you is, but it could be with a boss, it could be with another coworker, it could be with a friend. They test you in the beginning of a relationship by pushing your boundaries. They want to see what they can get away with. And if you don't have boundaries and you allow them to keep pushing you and doing what they want and trying to please them as a way to get them off your back or to make things better, you're not going about it the right way. What you're doing to a narcissist is inviting them in. So if you are not having boundaries, you're trying to be more pleasing, you're trying to use honey to connect with them, what have you, that might work with a normal person, but with a narcissistic or a toxic person, that's a green flag for them to keep on treating you like garbage, to make it even worse the way they treat you, to try and get even more supply out of you. And it becomes a bit of a game for them. And so that's why you feel like you are attracting them and you are actually targeted by them. So getting those boundaries nice and strong is what is going to help you avoid those toxic relationships. And number six is kind of a piggyback on the last one is that you have very poor boundaries. And this is because when you were growing up in the narcissistic home, you were not allowed to have boundaries. You were an extension of your mother. That is the way she saw it. You belonged to her. She owned you. and you were there to reflect her back to herself. So you don't get to have boundaries in a case like that. If you were like me, you were told what to wear, what to do, what activities you could take part in, uh, how to wear your hair, who you could be friends with, and on and on and on. And so you didn't get to make decisions. You didn't get to say what you want. You didn't get to say what you don't want. You had to be quiet about all those things. And that was your way of literally staying alive. Because when you're talking about your primary caregiver, there's a real bond there that makes you feel that if she's not happy with you, you might die. And even though that's not technically true, it could be if you were a child who would be abandoned by that caregiver, and then you wouldn't have access to the resources that she provides you, like the food, the clothing, the shelter, and so on. But it is a feeling that you could die without her. And so her rejection feels really life-threatening. And so that is why you stop trying to have boundaries. And you, again, that extends out to everybody else in your world. It doesn't stop with your mother. You become a person who doesn't have boundaries with anyone. And so, what used to keep you safe as a child, because not having boundaries did keep you safe in that home, you wouldn't be punished, you wouldn't be abandoned, you wouldn't be rejected. And that gave some solace to your nervous system at the time. But now, not having boundaries is actually very unsafe. So, as you know, it can even be life-threatening. You can invite in, say, a narcissistic partner. And as we know, toxic men can be violent. They've even been known to, when you try to leave them, they can unalive you. I think I have to say, you know what I mean. But it can be very dangerous for you not to have boundaries. And I say that literally. But that is why you don't have them. It comes from that childhood home where it was safer not to have boundaries and where you literally weren't allowed to have a separation between yourself and your mother. And that's what boundaries are. They are a separation between yourself and other people. They're that healthy wall, or I like to call it actually a red, like a rope, a velvet rope, like the VIP room, that separates you, the VIP room, from the rest of the world. And in order to get past your velvet rope and into your VIP room, people have to, pass certain tests. And these tests are, do they respect you? Do they care about you? Do they treat you the way you want to be treated? And you need boundaries in place in order for them to prove themselves and step past the velvet rope. So that's boundaries. And the last one, number 7, is perfectionism. And perfectionism is something a lot of daughters of narcissistic mothers struggle with. I used to as well. And this is because, of course, you got the sense when you were little that if you weren't perfect, you were no good. You got the sense that, again, who you were was not good enough. So maybe if I could be perfect, if I can be better, if I can do everything right, then maybe I'll get love. And then, of course, if you did make mistakes, you were punished or ridiculed for those. I can remember, my mother wasn't the only villain in my household. I also had a father who was emotionally abusive, mostly emotionally absent, but he also was really good at the dirty looks and the contempt and the telling me I'm not smart and things like that, even though I was actually brilliant. I skipped a grade, I had a very high IQ, all of those things. And I think it might have been a threat to him. I'm not sure. But I can remember being like 5 years old and doing something not even wrong, like just something that nobody ever taught me to do. And he would treat me like the stupidest person and give me the dirtiest looks because I didn't know how to do that. And you can imagine how that felt as a 5-year-old and not realizing that actually you're not supposed to know how to do things. It's his job to teach you how to do things. So it's actually his deficit if you don't know how to do something. But of course, as a child, you can't put that together. You're going to blame yourself. You're going to think you're stupid. So if I can avoid making mistakes, then maybe I'll be okay. And of course, this is anathema to a healthy life or to growth or to anything that a healthy parent would teach you. Because what I taught my children and what healthy parents teach their children is that mistakes are how we learn. We have to make mistakes in order to learn. That is life. And when you don't learn that, you're really missing a huge key to life. And you go through trying to be perfect, imposter syndrome, wasting so much time preparing for things that don't need to be perfect, whether it's at work, you're staying up all night for a presentation that could have taken a couple hours to do if you didn't have to dot every I and cross every T. And on top of that, your presentation isn't even going to be as good because you memorized it and you had to make it just so. And so you're not relaxed, and everybody's going to feel that. It's just such a mess. There's no such thing as perfect. There's no reason to be perfect. Perfect isn't even desirable. And so you really want to learn to let go of that. So now that we know the seven signs, and there are more, but I've chosen these top seven, that you were raised by a narcissistic mother, how can you heal from that? And I'd say there are three major ways. And the first one is that you need to get support, whatever that looks like for you. But I would say if you can make that professional support, and it's great to have friends who understand. Most of us don't. If you were raised by a narcissistic mother, even if you have a friend who tries to understand, who is on your side, she might not really get it. And that can be re-traumatizing to you. A part of her might be thinking you have something to do with it because she can't imagine what it is really like to have a narcissistic mother. So you can get group support, and there are groups as low cost as $15 a month, $30 a month, with minimal support, but at least you're in a place where you're not alone and other people really do know what you're going through, all the way up to private coaching in the thousands for, a 3 month container, which is what I offer. And so, whatever the support looks like for you, it could be a trauma-informed therapist, but really make sure that they understand narcissistic abuse, and better yet, that they have gone through it themselves. I personally recommend working with someone who has been through this themselves because I get told that that is the most healing thing. That is like 50% of the healing is just being with someone who has actually been through it. But I'd say second best is someone who understands at least what narcissistic abuse is all about. So that's the first thing. Get your support, not a group that doesn't have a professional facilitator, not a group of people who is just there to vent, because you can be re-traumatized by that. And in addition, you're not going to grow. You don't want a free Facebook group where people just go and pour on the trauma stories. Like that is not healing to you. That is detrimental to your healing. So make sure it's facilitated by someone who understands, who has been trained, and who knows that we don't heal by retelling our stories over and over again. That is not helpful. And the second way I recommend is inner child healing. And inner child healing is reparenting yourself. So it's reparenting that part of you, that hypervigilant part that was forced to take care of you when nobody else would and when it was way too young. So that is the part of you that might feel a little bit immature, emotionally dysregulated, the part of you that gets triggered, the part that can't make decisions, the part that self-sabotages. That's the biggest one. Your inner child is the one who sabotages you, whether it's through addictions, perfectionism, procrastination, whatever it is. They do that because they think they are protecting you, and the child inside actually thinks it's keeping you alive when it does these things. So there are many routes to inner child healing. You want to give yourself the care and attention that you never received. You want to reassure the child that you are the adult now, and you want to do it in a way where you're not pushing the child away. You're connecting with that child. You're understanding that child. You are thanking that child for what it has done for you so far. and giving it an opportunity to do something different. It doesn't mean the child is afraid of you wanting to get rid of it. And as soon as it feels like you're trying to push it away, it's going to hang on even tighter. And it's just like a real child trying to get attention, right? So you can give it a different job. You can say, I'm the adult now. I have access to resources that I didn't have when I was little. I can live if somebody rejects me. It's not like when I was a kid that I would die if I was rejected. I have my own job. I can buy my own clothes and groceries, and I can drive a car. I can drive myself home if somebody's letting me down. Like all of these things you have now that I can Google and all these things that you didn't have. It's not only about money, resources are also access to things that you couldn't access when you were a child. Support from other people, for example. You can call a friend and tell her what's going on. You can, like I said, get involved with that group or that coaching or whatever it is, the things you couldn't do when you were a child. When you were a child, you couldn't tell anybody, and that was just compounding the trauma. Now you have access to all these things you didn't before. So this is a way to reassure your child and invite them into an experience of actually being a child. So your parents didn't parent you the way they should have. Now you can parent your inner child with your new knowledge of how to be a good parent. So, and if you have your own children, you can parent them in tandem with this. That's what I did. I was healing my own inner child while I was raising my children, and it was a really beautiful experience of being able to raise them. Not that I didn't make a ton of mistakes, but being able to raise them in a way where I actually cared and I was actually making an effort to give them the tools to grow into healthy adults, which now they're doing. And so, yeah, you want to parent that inner child, invite it into an experience of being a child. So that means find us something fun to do. You probably don't have a lot of hobbies or escapes from the harshness of life, and there are healthy distractions. Not all distractions are unhealthy. It's just that we gravitate to the unhealthy ones. Healthy distractions are like doing sports for a hobby or arts and crafts for a hobby, anything that allows you to lose yourself in something where you don't have to have a goal. It's not about being perfect. It's just about being. It's just about allowing yourself to play. So that's what you want to invite your inner child into. And you can even do things like I did, like do you have a memory of enjoying something as a child that did give you that feeling of escape in a healthy way? For me, I used to love my Barbies. I used to love my Barbies, and I used to love my paper dolls with the different outfits. And later on, I would get into fashion. So that was a sign that this was just about dressing up for me. And so I went on Etsy and I got some paper dolls with different outfits. And it was actually the same one I had when I was a kid. I saw it on Etsy and I remembered it was something that my relatives had sent me from England. And it was these two dolls. One had brown hair, one had blonde hair, and they were called, I think, Rosie and Rachel, these dolls. And my younger daughter happens to be called Rachel too, which is just an aside. But yeah, these paper dolls meant so much to me. And so I just got them and I played with them a little bit as an adult to connect with that child inside me. So that's one of the ways you can do it too. So the third major way you can start to shift these outcomes of growing up with a narcissistic mother is self-compassion or mindful self-compassion. And this is a modality that was developed by Kristen Neff, and she has a website, selfcompassion.org, that you can refer to for a number of embodied exercises to help you with this. But self-compassion is what it sounds like. It is being kind to yourself, but it is also understanding that you are not alone. And she calls that common humanity. So it is not minimizing what you're going through. It is not saying that other people have it worse. I shouldn't be complaining. It's accepting that there is suffering here and that suffering is part of being human and that there are other people going through this. And I can tell you, whatever it is you're going through, You can Google it and you will find that there are millions of other people going through the same thing, no matter how weird you think it is, I promise you. And so the third pillar, so the first is self-kindness. When we're talking about mindful self-compassion, there are three pillars, and the first one is self-kindness, which is what it sounds like, not being so mean to yourself, not being so hard on yourself. How would you talk to a friend who is going through something? You wouldn't talk to yourself that way, but you want to become the person who does talk to yourself that way, the way you would talk to a friend. And then pillar two is the common humanity. I'm not alone in my suffering. Other people are going through this as well. If I want to Google and see that that's true, I am welcome to do that. It's been very soothing for me. I was going through something that I thought I was the only one. Sure enough, I Google it. I just kind of put the words together of what it was, and millions of people going through it around the world. They've got support groups for it. They're doing research on it, and it's called maladaptive daydreaming. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but that is the thing I thought nobody else did. Sure enough, I Google it, and millions are doing it. And then the third part of self-compassion is mindfulness. This is the acceptance of your emotions exactly as they are. And that might be something that you have never done. It means you don't minimize how you feel and you don't blow it out of proportion. You become the observer of your emotions instead of being absorbed by them. So that observe, don't absorb. That might be something that you've heard before. You watch your emotions go by. So if you do a meditation, for example, you don't have to shut down and make your mind a blank slate. You can just watch your feelings go by without judging them. And that is the key. So, whatever you're feeling, there's nothing wrong with it. It's only the shame that you put on top of that feeling. That is the thing you want to stop doing. And so, there is nothing shameful about any kind of feeling. How many times have you told yourself, and I know I did this too, because when I started doing this practice, I thought this is the first time I haven't said to myself, you shouldn't feel that way. That was always my go-to, you shouldn't feel that way. And I would give myself a pep talk instead of allowing myself to process the feeling. I would talk myself out of it. And if you do that, you're really missing an opportunity to allow yourself to process the feelings because these emotions have really important information for us. We need to feel them in order to get the healing that we need and that they offer. And if you just kind of step over them, you're really missing that opportunity and you won't get the healing you would have got if you allowed yourself to feel them and go through them. So that's really, really important. You might call it shadow work if you're having so-called negative emotions, allowing yourself to get curious about those, allowing yourself to ask where they come from, which is so often related to what happened in childhood. If you have a sense of hopelessness, of course, this comes from a childhood where you didn't have any control, where you didn't feel effective because nothing you did made any difference. That's just an example. For me, it was expecting the worst all the time because at least I could control that. And then the impact it had on my life is that I was always getting the worst. It was one calamity after another when I was in my 20s. And that was the energetic output of me expecting that. And that's how not healing this stuff can really keep you in a life that is not working for you. So, those are three ways that you can heal this stuff. And I hope that this has helped you somehow. I hope that it's spoken to you if you needed it. And if you like the content, please do subscribe to the channel. It helps us get it out to as many people as possible. And check out my other videos. There's others. If you don't know yet whether your mother is a narcissist, you can check out some of the other videos that will help you understand that. And thank you so much for listening.